Well, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is able to jump on. We appreciate you joining our webinar here with Kelly Cawthorn. We are honored to have State Representative Ann Bollin, or Chair Bollin, I should say, Chair of the House Appropriations Committee, joining us once again. Chair Bollin, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. You've done this in the past, and we really appreciate the information you share and the insight you provide on the work you do in the House appropriations process. So appreciate that.
Thank you very
Um,
much for having me.
you bet. You probably don't need an introduction, but I don't know who is all on this call, so I'm going to do a very brief introduction. Rep. Bollin is currently serving in her fourth term. Wow, eighth year in the Michigan House. Last fall, after the election and the House Republicans took majority, Speaker Hall appointed her as chair of the House Appropriations Committee. Prior to serving in the House, she was the longest serving clerk in Brighton Township, Livingston County for, I believe, 16 years. You were the clerk there. So, wow.
Yes.
Tremendous public service there. You attended Central Michigan and also studied at the Taubman Fellow at Harvard University, the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Senior Executives, and State and Local Government. So awesome. Your district is the 49th district in parts of Livingston and Oakland counties. So appreciate that. So with that, I'll just kind of kick it off a little bit here. And we do have the chat is live. If people have questions, just throw them on the chat and we'll try to get to those as well. But I don't want to dwell on last year, but I think we all have a collective sigh of relief that last year is over, and probably not as much relieved as you are. But I just wanted to talk just a couple of minutes about last year, because for those of us who have been in and around Lansing for a long time, it was a very unique budget year. And so I don't know if we want to say like wow or whoa or what, but it was something else. And it started out relatively normal. The governor's, budget presentation last February, and the State of the State address also in February. And then subcommittees started their work. And then there were things that popped up, like, there wasn't a House passed version of the budget as there was in the past in May. And then we got into June and there seemed to be a lack of progress. And then we passed the July 1st statutory deadline. And then we got into August, and then we saw the House proposed budget finally pass. And of course, then we got into September and we had a week extension of the budget. And finally, the budget, I think, was passed in October 3rd or 4th. So a unique year. And I just wanted, if you could share with us some of your thoughts as you reflect on 2025, now that we're going quickly into 2026's process.
Absolutely. It's upon us, right? Budget season. So I would say that in looking back, I do think it was a transformational year. I think it was honestly very important to approach the budget like we did. So very early on, after my appointment, I think I was appointed on the 13th or 14th of January. I did some interviews and really kind of laid it out there what I thought we had to do. And that was really take a deep dive line by line on the state budget. We had really the first budget that we were post-COVID. The manna from Washington was no longer there. The other thing was that, I am in my 8th year. I have served on the Appropriations Committee. And honestly, my first years, there was a lot more bipartisan work that was done, bipartisan discussion. And then we had a trifecta, and there was absolutely no conversation, no negotiations. There were a lot of policies that had been long in place. They were overturned, and it was extremely important, I think, to be able to kind of reset, if you will. And also, I wanted to make sure that we were reestablishing sort of a foundation on everybody. And, I like to be a collaborator in a spirit of cooperation. And I thought it was important to be able to do that, to take that deep dive line by line. There were other things that came. One, a $9 billion fund balance had been spent in 2 years. We foresaw that we had a dwindling population. We saw in the area of education, there were a lot of deficiencies. Kids, even before COVID, coming out of COVID, we saw a lot of the accountability measures erased. Kids or schools, education was struggling. We saw long overdue need for investments in infrastructure as well, mainly the roads. And we also had things pending, right? So we wanted to wait for CREC, which is the Constitutional Revenue Estimating Conference, but we also had this pending thing with the transition in Washington to a new president, and what ultimately became the one big beautiful bill coming forward in July. So we started our work. We did put in early in the spring a prevention shutdown plan, which actually we did have to utilize. It wasn't that we expected to have it, but we wanted to make sure because we heard things were very partisan, I would say, in talking points, and that we were going to force a shutdown. That was never the intent. The idea was to, what are the basic things that we need to make sure that we've secured, government has to provide for state government, and put those in a prevention shutdown. And so, we sent that over early on. It was no signal. We did pass our school aid budget on time. We did put that, and then on June 30th, the Senate went home and didn't come back until September. And so the school aid budget. So on the school aid budget, we laid all of our cards on the table. The same thing with the roads plan. We knew we had been studying that. And so as we worked through the process, ultimately we all came together. I said very early on also, like, it was going to be clunky. It was a very different process, right? And it was clunky. But at the end of the day, we did end up with a very transformational approach to the budget. We ended up reducing taxes, investing $1.7 billion in roads, finally fixing the damn roads, moving towards better roads, record high pupil funding, and looking at more of some of the architecture, if you will, of the state budget process. And it was bipartisan. This is the budget. Again, it was my 7th year in the legislature, and I had people come and say it was remarkable. They've never seen such broad bipartisan support and the highest number of yes votes coming out of the House on a final budget. And I think that speaks to the work that we did do. If the process was clunky, the end result was, I think, doing the best for the most.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Um, I know some of the themes you had mentioned them too in last year's budget that were priorities of the House Republicans. I jotted down like kind of 4 of them that were reoccurring. The speaker talked about them a lot. You talked about them a lot of members of the caucus. And they were reducing spending, road funding as a priority, earmark reform, and reducing taxes. And I know there were a few more. There was education funding, things like that. But I know those kind of 4 popped up a lot. How would you say, after now the budget is complete, and you kind of just alluded to it, but those 4 issues, how well do you think they were addressed in the process?
Well, I think that we hit the target on every single one of them. And I think that we came to it, that it really is something that I think people on both sides of the aisle feel good about. And I'm going to start with the transparency, accountability, the earmark process. We started that with an adoption of a resolution that we were going to have take a deeper dive into the earmarks, establishing that they had to have an existence in the state of Michigan. They had to, have been established for 3 years. We went through hours and hours of public testimony and asking, and that was to help us filter the decision making and have a really good understanding of what we were funding. It wasn't to say that earmarks had to go away. It was to say, let's have some more transparency in this. And are they a good use of taxpayer dollars? Ultimately, that was signed into law and transferred into law, and we now have this new earmark process. We often refer to it as the LDSI, Legislative Directed Spending. And so we have a new process. We continued that. We have a lower budget than last year. We were able to reduce the budget significantly. And even considering that we had to, in the DHHS space, have some consideration for the IPA tax and some of the other things in the one big beautiful bill, we were able to come in lower as well. On roads and infrastructure, we actually were able to finally have a steady stream permanent funding of $1.7 billion to going to our local roads. And we were able to do that. It was revenue neutral by having a tax shift instead of the sales tax at the pump. It's now a fuel tax, and it goes directly to the local roads. We made the schools whole with that. And so that was a big part. And we cut taxes. So no tax on tips, Social Security, and overtime. And that was on the heels of a very, very important policy initiative that was right out of the gate in the beginning of the year that had been surfacing for over a year and it was never able to be resolved. And that was the earned sick time, which affected probably many of your clients, people across the state, and that you went the earned sick time and the tipped wages. And so that kind of fell in place with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. So well, now we're in 2026, right? We've got the governor's budget presentation next Wednesday, the 11th, I believe, right? A joint
Yes, Wednesday at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Is that Heritage Hall again this
It will
year?
be at Heritage Hall and we'll start at 1 p.m. And, say budget director, I think on behalf of the governor or the governor will be presenting that budget.
Great.
It is a joint committee meeting between the Senate Appropriations Committee and the House Appropriations Committee. So kind of a full house, but I think we're all ready to get started.
Yes, excellent. So going into 2026, and we just talked about, a lot that went on through the process in 2025. Is there anything that jumps out to you immediately that you'd want to do differently? Obviously, you were brand new last year, and there's obviously a learning curve as chair of a large, powerful, influential committee like this. You've got a lot of subcommittees and chairs that are doing a lot of great work as well. But anything that comes to mind that you would do differently as you begin the 2026 legislative process after the governor's presentation?
Well, I don't know if we would, I think just circumstantially, we will be doing it different. And that is somewhat with the timeline, right? It won't be as transformational and as clunky as it was because it won't be our first time around. But I can tell you, we will approach it with the same vigor and desire to make sure that we're providing value for the taxpayers, protecting their public health, safety, and welfare. Education will be key, infrastructure, more accountability, and filling the gaps where needed. And accountability is a big factor. So I think what will be different, and again, it's circumstantially, is I think our timeline will be better. And we won't be working from the bottom up. We basically didn't even look at the exec recommendation last year. We really started line by line, almost, what people refer to as zero-based budgeting. And this year we will be starting with a look at the executive recommendation as it relates to the current year budget.
Sure.
And I think that will be helpful. That'll kind of settle, the neighbors here that are used to a very different process than what it was last year.
Yeah. Excellent. You talked about the LDSI process or earmarks, and that's kind of been a buzz around town here, both last year and now going into this year under this new process. It's now in statute. We see all the forms. The Senate has their form now. The House has their form, and people are kind of trying to navigate how that works with the new earmark process. So I did get a question about, and this is getting a little bit in the weeds, but on the LDSI form process, if there is an organization who has statewide impact, or maybe even regionally, like they serve all of West Michigan or maybe all of Southeast Michigan, because I know one of the requirements in the new process is the legislator, wherever the organization is located, that is the legislator that has to submit that LDSI or be the sponsor of that request or that project. So how do folks navigate if their organization represents a larger kind of part of the state? Can we go to any legislator to sponsor?
No, I think that the law is very clear in that you have to be the sponsor. It has to be within your district, or it has to be impactful of the region with around your district, right? And so I think looking at some of these like projects, initiatives and stuff, I mean, clearly like a representatives district is much smaller than a Senate district, right? And so those are things will be into consideration. And that's where, just kind of doing some discernment about that. Now, programs that are statewide kind of are a little bit different, right? So something that provides statewide resources around the state is not generally considered to be an LDSI, right? You may be providing more area, say in my area than maybe, the community on the west side, but it is a statewide service that is available to everybody and does. Maybe the numbers are not quite the same, but really the service is available at very similar levels. So that is, it's kind of one of those quirkinesses of it. But we did find that going through the process, like there are some statewide programs that are it's important. They are statewide and they wouldn't have to be sponsored necessarily. Now, the leadership and also the Approps chairs, on a subcommittee, chair, vice chair can also sponsor projects. But I think the intent is that these do fall in the legislatively directed, and who knows best how it will benefit, and to be able to tell the story and sell the story other than a representative that, is going to greatly impact their area. So that was somewhat the reasoning behind that. You see that the websites are both up and running. We will have hearings. We will approach it the very same way as we did last year with the hearings. And it is a great opportunity for people to come in and to be able to testify and submit and basically educate people about what their projects are and why they're important, how they impact, right? And the impact sometimes is very, it could be a very small program that has a very large impact, or it sets a pathway. And that's what we want to see with the transparency, is the demonstration of that and, the accountability that is part of the accountability process.
Yeah. Yeah. So last year, a lot of them went through Rep. Jenkins Arno with the Leo subcommittee, but if there are LDSIs that are more, DHHS related, will they go through a subcommittee through DHHS, or they'll all
They
go
will go through the LDSI process. And I feel that that's extremely important. That's what we did last year. And a big part of it is, I think it adds to the transparency, okay? And the continuity of in the process for all of the LDSIs. Excuse me a minute. And so that's why kind of breaking them in subjects. It's not to say that a subcommittee may not incorporate them into their hearing process and their budget development, but they will sift through, kind of funnel through the Leo budget.
Yeah. Okay. And last year, the Senate, because it was so late in the game, I think they just did it through the full Senate committee, not through the subcommittee process. And maybe they'll change this year now that they have more time.
Right.
We'll have to wait and see. And one clarification, of course, you don't have to have your proposal in both chambers. It just has to be somewhere in the process, either in the House portal or the Senate portal. It doesn't have to be in both.
Correct.
Okay.
It does not have to be, but the House is only going to approve projects that are in our portal.
For just the House passed version, or for the final budget?
House passed.
Okay. But I got you. Okay. But the final product will include both Senate project and House.
Likely.
Most likely. Okay, perfect. All right. Thanks for that clarification. That helps a great deal. I want to jump gears a little bit and talk about the Rural Health Transformation Fund. And I know you've spent quite a bit of time. I think you had at least 2 committee hearings discussing this. And for our listener, I think most of them know we have a lot of clients in the healthcare space, but just quickly, the Rural Health Transformation Fund is part of the One Big Beautiful Bill approved by Congress. It's $50 billion over 5 years, so $10 billion across all 50 states, $10 billion a year for 5 years. Michigan is anticipated to receive $173 million roughly for this fiscal year. So that process is playing out. I think they're getting close to kind of the application process and all that. So can you just talk a little bit about why you spent a lot of time on this in your caucus and what you think the legislature's role will be in this fund and the allocation of these funds out across all of Michigan?
So thank you very much for that. Like, this is extremely important to a state like Michigan. All right. Michigan has a very unique landscape compared to other states, right? We have 10 million people. We have very urban areas. We have ex-suburban areas. We have rural and then very rural, right? And so looking at it, it's not one size fits all. The goal is to be transformational to one, have access and make Michigan healthier. And our state plan was submitted, our program they call them, and the state requested 200 million. We were awarded 173 million. And part of that is we left money on the table because we did not include some of the more gross, in large, if you will, impactful health policies. Presidential fitness, nutrition education and med school, SNAP related sugary foods and stuff like that. And so my goal was, it is very impactful. We have seen the advance health insurance tax credit go away. We have seen the Medicaid, the work requirements that transform. We have an aging population here in Michigan. We see healthcare costs going up, health going down. And so this is a very good opportunity for the state, right? And how do we do this? We want to make sure healthcare is more accessible and more affordable for everybody, right? And that just doesn't include us as individuals, but how does a hospital do that? How does a community mental health department do that? Like, we're all in this together to make Michigan healthier. And we will be balancing that plan against the state budget. And so that's why it's extremely important that we are trying to advance measures that are going to accomplish all those things.
Mhm. And what will be the legislature's role in kind of the allocation of the funds?
Well, it's not specifically in the allocation of that fund, but we have a lot of other dollars and state dollars. I mean, the DHH budget makes up, 37% of the state budget.
Mhm.
We're going to be looking at that. How do you leverage that? How do you make sure that you're not doing something that's conflicting? You're adding to it. Are you going to get something? It's very heavy on data sharing and collection. And it would be a shame if we repeated the mistakes of COVID to not do anything with the data or be collecting it.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Switching gears a little bit, there was a fund. It's called the Michigan Innovation Fund. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I'm trying not to get in the weeds a little bit or too much, but it was a $60 million fund that was approved in a prior fiscal year. But in this past summer in July, it was a competitive grant process. There was 8 organizations awarded a majority of the funds. So these were big grants, like $10 million grants to different organizations. A lot of universities received them. These were work projects, so multiple year projects, and they were eliminated as part of the work that was done in December by the House Appropriations Committee through the work project changes that occurred. Um, just curious how organizations, because they were competitively awarded and they were competitively applied for, how would you recommend that these organizations go back to try and get those funds restored? Would you recommend going through the LDSI process or work through the regular appropriations process, or just would like to get your thoughts on that?
All right. So I think that it's important to understand the work project disapproval process. And when we went through the process, you're basing those decisions based on the recommendation and the information that you get brought forward. Okay. The work projects are another area very early on. I've said we need to look at. We have $10 billion worth of work projects. All right. And when the State Budget Office sends a letter to the Appropriations Committee of the Senate and the House, They send us the list. We don't create the list, and it's all or nothing. We can't divide it out. That is something that will be very different now with our LDSI process as well, because some of these sort of fall into that category, if you will. And it's either thumbs up or thumbs down. So unfortunately, some good things got lost. It has always been our intent that we hope to revisit all of them through a supplemental. And it is still our hope that we can negotiate a supplemental, and that supplemental would likely be in concert with the close of books, which would be done and completed by March 31st of 26. All right. And so that is kind of the expectations that we had. We still do have. Of course, we know then that the House was forced to sue by what we feel was an incorrect Attorney General's opinion. And so now we are somewhat in abeyance. And on some of these workforce related training, upskilling programs, what we have found, like some of them are very, very good, all right, and they produce. But even as people have come in and out of my office through the subcommittee and whatnot, is maybe they need a refresh. And so as we're moving into the next budget year, these things as they're resurrected, if you will, we'll be having conversations about how we might do up a reset. So I would say that yes, I would encourage, for the consideration in the 27 budget. But I would also say, wouldn't say it's all lost on 26 and a supplemental.
Okay, great. Well, that's helpful. It gives us some direction on how to navigate it. So back to the disapproval process that happened in December, it kind of surprised a lot of people in this line of work. And you said there were $10 billion on the books in work project funding currently. And you disapproved 460 some million of that.
164 million.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also want to, we're on that. The request was $2.7 billion. We disapproved 664 million, and we negotiated 2 billion in the 26 budget and the 25 supplemental that was adopted with the 26 budget. All right. So in a very minimal amount that was disapproved. And why I want to point that out is one, it was a minimal amount, but two is people thought this was such an upheaval and how could we possibly do that? And it was a terrible thing. But I think you have to look at the whole landscape and give it a little bit different perspective, right? And the work projects, while people found it surprising, if people have been following me or sat in committee meetings with me, it really should be, again, no surprise that we were looking at these work projects. Every subcommittee was charged at the beginning of 2025 to look at existing work projects. Were they making progress in the departments? What was their plan? We know that the budget, there will be budget shortfalls. That was actually affirmed with the most recent CREC. And, we have a $1 billion shortfall going into 27 budget. And I think it was our absolute duty, and knowing that even without CREC occurring, we saw the projections that it made wise sense, and it was a fiscally responsible thing to do, was to look at that. And we've been, people have been very concerned about that you're cutting off this or that. I'm going to give you the RX Kids, for example, in saying it wasn't going to get off the ground. We've heard a lot about it. It was a $20 million appropriation. There was $18 million that had not been spent. The reason we were told is that they were getting the program off the ground. And so I would say with a $270 million appropriation, it should have been an absolute seamless transition that we were already almost a quarter into the year, not problematic. But we will be having hearings and having the oversight committee will be looking more into that. But I mean, those are the kind of things that kind of get lost, and I would call it the noise. But I want people to understand it was, we thoughtfully approached this.
Yeah. Appreciate that. We did hear that as it was reported last year when it was playing out. So appreciate all that work. just a reminder, if any of the participants have a question, just throw it up in the Q&A and we'll try to get to it. Okay, switching gears once again, on adult education funding. And so we're kind of getting into education space. And I know you mentioned there's record funding for our K-12 system. But in the adult education space, there is some reduced funding there. A huge need occurs in it exists in our state. We have over 300,000 men over the age of 25, hey, like me, who do not have a high school diploma. I do have a high school diploma. But there are some of these programs have been cut and the funding was reduced. Do you think there's an interest? Have you heard from the caucus about this as a problem, as maybe something to work on to restore, to make it a priority to support those adults who don't have high school diplomas, who are trying to get re-educated and enter the workforce? Has that been
So I
issued a
think, yeah,
process?
I think that, we're taking I call it stepping on the balcony and kind of looking down on what all the approaches are. We have a lot of duplication and perhaps overlap, or we spend an awful lot in time and energy and money administering a lot of these programs. But we are trying to hit this, there's a great need to look at some of the licensing, right? So in our efforts to reduce red tape, we are looking at occupational licensing. Is it something, while everybody, the stats show that if you have a GED, a college degree, et cetera, your earnings can be better. But we really are wanting to work towards the full potential and the reality of people living a full life. And, how can we do that? Is the GED? Yes, it may be a ticket, but is there some way we can help this workforce demographic out by maybe, speeding through licensing? Um, and, a comparable test or something, right? We want to make sure that, obviously people are skilled, they're meeting the demands of the workforce. That includes, the work skills. We've heard there's a real lax in soft skills on this side. So, we have so many organizations and groups and programs. Adult education is one. Used to be a lot of benefit through the community education, but work skills provides a lot of that. Path Forward, some of our Reconnect programs. It's, where I think we're taking a much fuller look at it, and we have a broader spectrum of programs now. Whereas, probably 10 years ago, there were one or two.
Yeah.
So making sure people even, that go through the criminal justice are transitioning back. So they're prepared when they return to civilian life. So I think we're going to continue to look at those and realize how important it is. We want people to be self-sufficient and productive and feel as though they have a lot of self-worth and contribute.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Well, we're getting to the end of our time with you. I know this year is a big election year. A lot of campaigns happening, obviously, with all House members up, 110 House members up, all 38 senators up. We've got statewide races. So a lot of campaign and election work will be coming quickly. So I guess the $1 million question is, will the budget be completed by July 1st of 2026?
Well, I'm going to tell you this, that we are going to work very, very hard to make sure that we have a fiscally responsible and sustainable budget that serves the taxpayers of Michigan. And I will say, as one who is elected and who chairs appropriations, my goal is to make sure that we are delivering that. I'm hopeful that it is on an adequate time frame, but it is important that we are approaching this. I don't approach this from a partisan standpoint or election or reelection bid. I look at it as doing the people's work and delivering for the people. That includes all of you as stakeholders across the state of Michigan, and that's my commitment.
Excellent. We appreciate that. And we we here at Kelly Cawthorn appreciate your leadership, all of the work that you do for the people of the state of Michigan in the legislature. We know it's not easy, and we appreciate your partnership. You always have a open door and a listening ear, and we really, really appreciate that. It's a difficult process. I know I sat in your shoes for some years, and it's difficult, and I really can appreciate that. So With that, we appreciate it and we will let you get on the rest of your busy day. So Chair Bollin, thanks again for your time and we'll see you real soon
All
over in
right.
the Capitol.
Thank you, Dave, to you and all of Kelly Caphorn and your clients. Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day. We'll see
You
you.
too. See you soon.
Bye-bye.